This isn't their home. It's a crime scene.
The storm outside rattled our Victorian's old windows like skeletal fingers tapping for entry. Inside, the warmth felt forced, artificial, much like the smile I plastered on my face as I dealt another hand of cards to my wife, my brother, and her best friend. "Truth or dare, Vivian?" I asked, my voice carrying that practiced architect's tone I used when explaining blueprints to clients who couldn't tell a load-bearing wall from a partition. My wife Vivian leaned back in her chair, her auburn hair catching the lamplight. Even after 8 years of marriage, she was stunning. The kind of woman who turned heads at grocery stores and made other wives clutch their husbands' arms a little tighter. Tonight, though, something felt different. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe it was the way she kept glancing at my younger brother Eric, who sat across from her with that cocky grin he'd worn since high school. "Truth," she said, her green eyes sparkling with mischief. "I'm feeling dangerous tonight." Sienna Marlowe, Vivian's best friend and our town's most successful realtor, giggled like a teenager. "Ooh, this is going to be good. Nick, make it juicy." I shuffled the cards in my hands, considering. We'd been playing this stupid game for an hour, ever since dinner ended and the second bottle of wine appeared. Eric had dared Sienna to text her ex-boyfriend. Sienna had asked Eric about his biggest financial mistake, which led to an uncomfortable story about his failed restaurant venture that I'd helped bail him out of. Now it was my turn to ask the questions. "All right," I said, setting down the deck. "What's your secret fantasy? The one you've never told anyone?" Vivian's smile widened, and she leaned forward conspiratorially. The candlelight flickered across her face, casting shadows that made her look almost predatory. "You really want to know?" "That's the game," I replied, though something in my gut was already warning me to stop, to change the subject, to suggest we watch a movie instead. She took a long sip of wine, then looked directly at me. "You, me, and Eric? You watching us?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Eric choked on his beer. Sienna's mouth fell open. I felt my face freeze in what I hoped looked like an amused expression, but inside, something cold and sharp was sliding between my ribs. "That's creative," I managed, forcing a laugh. "Very Vivian." But I noticed things. The way Eric couldn't meet my eyes. The way Vivian's cheeks flushed, but not from embarrassment, from excitement. The way Sienna quickly looked away as if she knew something I didn't. The game continued for another 20 minutes, but the atmosphere had shifted. Every joke felt forced. Every laugh sounded hollow. When Eric excused himself to use the bathroom, I caught Vivian watching him walk away with an expression I'd never seen her wear when looking at me. By 11, everyone was ready for bed. Eric crashed in our guest room, again. He'd been between apartments for 3 months now, which was Eric speak for, "I spent my rent money on poker and cryptocurrency." Sienna hugged us all goodbye and drove home to her condo across town. Vivian went upstairs first, claiming exhaustion. I stayed downstairs, cleaning up glasses and trying to shake the uneasiness that had settled over me like a wet blanket. The house was old, and sound carried through the walls in ways that constantly surprised visitors. Tonight, I was grateful for that acoustic quirk. I was loading the dishwasher when I heard whispered voices from upstairs. Vivian's bedroom was directly above the kitchen, and the heating vent carried sound like a telephone. At first, I thought she was on the phone. Then I heard Eric's voice, low and urgent. "Can't keep doing this. He's getting suspicious." "Nick doesn't suspect anything," Vivian replied. "He's too trusting. Always has been. Did you see his face when you said that thing about your fantasy? I thought he was going to lose it. That was just wine talking. Besides, it worked, didn't it? Now, if he ever catches us, I can claim it was his idea all along, that I was just trying to fulfill his desires." My hands stopped moving. The glass I was holding slipped from my fingers and shattered in the sink. "What was that?" Eric's voice, panicked. "Just Nick cleaning up. Relax." I stood frozen, listening to my wife and brother discuss their affair as casually as they might debate what to watch on Netflix. The betrayal hit me in waves. First the shock, then the anger, then something colder and more calculating. "We need to be more careful," Eric was saying. "Maybe I should find my own place." "With what money? You're broke, remember? Besides, this is perfect. He pays for everything and we get to be together whenever we want. Just be patient a little longer." "Patient for what?" "I'm working on something. Something that will solve all our problems." Their voices dropped lower, becoming impossible to understand. I heard movement, then the distinctive creak of bed springs. My bed springs. I walked to the front closet, pulled out my overnight bag, and packed it with mechanical precision. Clothes, toiletries, phone charger, laptop. I left no note, made no announcement. I simply walked out of my own house and drove to the Marriott downtown. The desk clerk, a young woman with tired eyes, processed my credit card without comment. It was nearly midnight on a Friday in a small Maine town. She'd probably seen stranger things. In my sterile hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone. I could call Vivian, demand an explanation, start the fight that would end our marriage. I could confront Eric, maybe throw a punch, definitely throw him out of my house. Instead, I opened my laptop and began to plan. Because here's what my wife and brother didn't know about me. I'd built my architectural firm from nothing by being smarter than my competition, more thorough than my rivals, and absolutely ruthless when someone tried to take what was mine. They wanted to play games? Fine. But this time, I'd be dealing the cards. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood perfectly. I'd slept maybe 3 hours, spending most of the night staring at the hotel ceiling and thinking. By 7 a.m., I was dressed and driving to my office. Harrow and Associates occupied the top floor of a converted mill building downtown. I'd chosen the location specifically because it was the kind of place that impressed clients. Exposed brick, huge windows, the perfect blend of historic charm and modern efficiency. Now, walking through the empty office, I wondered what else in my life was just impressive window dressing hiding rot underneath. My assistant, Marty Kowalski, found me there at 8:30, hunched over my computer with a cup of gas station coffee. "Boss, what are you doing here? It's Saturday." Marty was ex-military, built like a fire hydrant, and had worked for me for 5 years. He was also the only person I trusted completely, which made him invaluable, and I was realizing, rare. "Couldn't sleep," I said without looking up. Figured I'd catch up on some work. Marty poured himself coffee from the machine and settled into the chair across from my desk. He had that look, the one that said he knew something was wrong, but wasn't going to push. It was one of the things I appreciated about him. "You look like heck," he observed. "Feel worse." I closed the laptop and rubbed my eyes. "Marty, how long have you known me?" 5 years. Why? "In that time, have I ever struck you as the kind of guy who'd share his wife with another man?" Marty's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. "Come again?" I told him everything. The game, the conversation I'd overheard, the way Vivian and Eric had been acting. Marty listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. "Son of a witch," he said when I finished. "Your own brother?" "Half-brother, technically, but yeah." I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the nearly empty street below. "The thing is, Marty, I keep thinking about what Vivian said, about working on something that would solve all their problems." "What do you think she meant?" "I think she meant me. I think I'm the problem they're planning to solve." Marty was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What do you want to do about it?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. "Where are you? Your car's gone. And Eric said you never came to bed last night. I'm worried." I showed Marty the message. He snorted. "She's worried, all right. Worried you figured out what's going on." "Probably." I typed back. "Had to come into the office. Emergency with the Morrison project. Be home later." Her response came immediately. "Okay, baby. Love you." "Jesus," Marty muttered, reading over my shoulder. "How long do you think this has been going on?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." I opened my laptop again. "Marty, I need a favor. You still talk to Terry Doyle?" Terry Doyle was Marty's old army buddy who'd become a private investigator after leaving the police force. He was discreet, thorough, and had no moral qualms about digging up dirt on cheating spouses. "Sure do. You want him to tail your wife?" "I want him to investigate both of them. Phone records, financial records, everything. But I want it done legally. No hacking, no breaking and entering, just good old-fashioned detective work." Marty nodded. "Terry's expensive, but he's worth it. What's your budget?" "Whatever it takes." By noon, Terry Doyle was sitting in my office looking exactly like Central Casting's idea of a private investigator. Rumpled suit, 5 o'clock shadow, eyes that had seen too much. He listened to my story with the same professional detachment a doctor might show while examining a rash. "How long you want me to watch them?" he asked when I finished. "Long enough to get proof." "And Terry? I don't just want to know what they're doing now. I want to know how long it's been going on, and I want to know what Vivian meant about solving all their problems. Terry quoted me a daily rate that would have made me wince 6 months ago. Now it seemed like the best money I'd ever spent. One more thing, I said as he stood to leave. Be careful. Vivian's smart and she's paranoid. If she catches you watching her, she'll know I'm on to them. Mr. Harrow, I've been doing this for 15 years. Your wife won't even know I exist. After Terry left, I spent the rest of Saturday at the office, trying to focus on actual work and failing miserably. Every time I tried to concentrate on blueprints or client proposals, my mind drifted back to Vivian and Eric. How long had they been laughing at me? How many times had they been together in my own house while I was at work? Around 6, I drove home. My house, our house, looked exactly the same as always. Victorian charm, perfectly maintained lawn, the kind of place that screams successful professional lives here. But now it felt like a stage set, all facade with nothing real behind it. Vivian met me at the door with a kiss that tasted like lies. How was your emergency? She asked, helping me out of my jacket. Boring. Construction delays, permit issues, you know how it is. Poor baby, you look exhausted. She touched my cheek with what seemed like genuine concern. Eric made dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta, but it smells amazing. Eric. Right. I'd almost forgotten he was still here, still living in my guest room, still sleeping with my wife. I found him in the kitchen, stirring sauce at my stove, drinking my beer, looking completely at home. When he saw me, his face lit up with that same charming smile that had gotten him out of trouble since childhood. Nick, there's the workaholic. I was starting to think you'd moved into your office permanently. Just busy, I said, accepting the beer he offered. Thanks for cooking. Least I can do. You and Viv have been so generous letting me crash here while I get back on my feet. The casual way he said Viv made my jaw clench. When had he started calling her that? Dinner was surreal. We sat around my dining room table like a normal family, husband, wife, freeloading brother-in-law, making conversation about the weather, local politics, Eric's job search. Vivian laughed at Eric's jokes. Eric complimented Vivian's hair. I sat there smiling and nodding while inside I was taking notes. The way Vivian's hand lingered when she passed Eric the salad. The way Eric's eyes followed her when she got up to refill the wine glasses. The way they both avoided looking directly at me for more than a few seconds at a time. After dinner, Vivian suggested we watch a movie. We settled into the living room, Vivian curled up next to me on the couch, Eric in the armchair. It was a romantic comedy, something light and meaningless. But I couldn't focus on the screen. Instead, I found myself studying my wife's profile in the flickering light, wondering how I'd missed the signs for so long. When the movie ended, Vivian yawned dramatically. I'm exhausted. I think I'll head up to bed. Me too, Eric said, stretching. Thanks for dinner and a movie, guys, just like old times. Old times. When had we ever done this before? I couldn't remember a single instance of the three of us having a cozy night in together. 20 minutes later, I was lying in bed next to my wife, listening to her breathing become slow and regular. When I was sure she was asleep, I slipped out of bed and crept to the guest room door. It was empty. I checked the bathroom, the kitchen, even the basement. No Eric. His car was still in the driveway, his clothes were still in the guest room, but he was nowhere to be found. Then I heard it, a soft creak from above. The attic access was in our bedroom closet. Someone was up there. I climbed the narrow stairs as quietly as possible, my phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness. The attic was mostly storage, old furniture, holiday decorations, boxes of books. But in the far corner, someone had created a little nest. Blankets, pillows, a battery-powered lantern. And there, curled up together like teenagers at summer camp, were my wife and my brother. I watched them for maybe 30 seconds, long enough to burn the image into my memory forever. Then I crept back downstairs, climbed into my empty bed, and began planning their destruction. Sunday morning, I woke up alone. Vivian was already in the kitchen making coffee and humming to herself. She looked radiant, glowing with the kind of satisfaction that comes from a night of good sleep and better love. Morning, sleepyhead, she said, kissing my cheek. You were out cold when I got up. I didn't want to wake you. Thanks. Where's Eric? Out for a run. You know how he is about staying in shape. I did know. Eric had always been vain about his body, spending hours at the gym and boring anyone who'd listen with details about his workout routine. Apparently, adultery was just another form of exercise for him. My phone buzzed with a text from Terry. Coffee? Have some preliminary info? I need to run some errands, I told Vivian. Back in a few hours. I met Terry at a diner across town, far from anywhere Vivian or Eric might randomly appear. He slid a manila folder across the table like we were in a spy movie. Your instincts were right, he said without preamble. They've been careful, but not careful enough. The folder contained phone records, credit card statements, and a timeline that made my stomach turn. Based on Terry's research, the affair had been going on for at least 8 months, maybe longer. Look at this, Terry said, pointing to a series of charges on Vivian's credit card. Motel 6 on Route 1. Same day every week for the past 6 months, always when you were at the Portland Planning Commission meetings. Thursdays. Every Thursday, I drove to Portland for the monthly commission meeting. And every Thursday, my wife and brother were checking into a cheap motel for afternoon closeness. There's more, Terry continued. Your brother's been making some interesting phone calls. Lawyers, mostly. Specifically, divorce lawyers. He's getting divorced? I didn't even know he was married. Not him. He's been asking questions about Maine divorce law. Community property, alimony, business assets, real detailed questions. The pieces were clicking into place. Vivian's comment about solving all their problems wasn't about getting Eric a job or finding him an apartment. It was about getting rid of me and taking everything I'd worked for. How detailed? I asked. Terry flipped through his notes. Detailed enough to suggest they're planning something specific. Questions about what happens to a business when one spouse dies versus when they get divorced. Questions about life insurance payouts. Questions about what constitutes grounds for adultery in Maine. They're planning to divorce me. Looks like it. But here's the interesting part. They're also asking about what happens if the other spouse contests the divorce. What kind of evidence would hold up in court, that sort of thing? I stared at the folder, my mind racing. They want a clean divorce. No messy custody battles, no fighting over assets. They want me to go quietly. That's my read. The question is, what are they planning to make you go quietly? Before I could answer, Terry's expression changed. He was looking over my shoulder toward the diner's entrance. Don't turn around, he said quietly. Your wife just walked in. My blood turned to ice water. Is she alone? No, she's with a woman, blonde, well-dressed. They're sitting 3 booths behind you. Sienna. It had to be Sienna. Can you hear what they're saying? Terry strained to listen. Something about timing and your brother. The blonde is saying something about being careful. We sat there for another 10 minutes, Terry occasionally updating me on fragments of conversation he could overhear. Finally, Vivian and Sienna left, but not before Vivian glanced in our direction. For a split second, our eyes met in the reflection of the window. Did she see me? I asked. Hard to tell, but we should probably assume yes. I drove home with my mind spinning. If Vivian had seen me with Terry, she'd know I was suspicious. That would accelerate whatever timeline they were working on. Sure enough, when I walked into the house, Vivian was waiting for me in the living room, her arms crossed and her expression cold. Who was that man you were having coffee with? What man? Don't lie to me, Nick. I saw you at Murphy's Diner. You were having a very intense conversation with someone I didn't recognize. I could feel the moment balancing on a knife's edge. I could confess everything, demand answers, start the fight that would end our marriage. Or I could lie, buy myself more time to prepare. His name is Terry Doyle. He's a contractor who specializes in historic renovations. I'm thinking about hiring him for the Morrison project. Vivian studied my face, looking for tells. After 8 years of marriage, she knew my expressions better than anyone. On a Sunday, at a diner across town? He's ex-military, weird schedule, and he doesn't like meeting in offices. Some kind of PTSD thing. It was a good lie, detailed enough to be believable, but not so elaborate as to be suspicious. Vivian's expression softened slightly. You should have told me. When I saw you with a stranger, I thought... She trailed off. Thought what? Nothing. It's stupid. I guess I'm just feeling insecure lately. Insecure? Right. Because cheating on your husband with his brother really makes you feel vulnerable about the relationship. There's nothing to worry about, I said, pulling her into a hug. You're stuck with me. She relaxed into my arms, and for a moment, I almost forgot what I knew. This was the woman I'd fallen in love with, the woman I'd married, the woman I'd planned to grow old with. The betrayal felt fresh all over again. Where's Eric? I asked. Still out. He said something about meeting a friend for drinks. A friend. Or maybe another married woman whose husband was conveniently out of town. That evening, I sat in my home office, ostensibly working on blueprints, but actually planning my next move. Through the thin walls, I could hear Vivian moving around upstairs, getting ready for bed. The domestic sounds that had once comforted me now felt like a mockery. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Eric. Can we talk? Not at the house, it's important." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Where?" "The Glass Hammer. 1 hour." The Glass Hammer was the kind of dive bar that attracted construction workers, off-duty cops, and people who didn't want to be found. It was also the last place anyone would expect to find an architect and a failed restaurateur having a heart-to-heart. I told Vivian I was going out for a drink with Marty, kissed her goodnight, and drove across town wondering what my brother wanted to discuss that couldn't wait until morning. The bar was exactly as advertised, dark, smoky, and filled with people who minded their own business. I found Eric in a corner booth, nursing a beer and looking more nervous than I'd ever seen him. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. "What's this about, Eric?" He took a long pull from his beer, then looked me directly in the eye. "I think Vivian is planning to leave you." I stared at Eric across the scarred wooden table, wondering if this was some kind of elaborate psychological warfare, or if my brother was actually stupid enough to think I'd believe his innocent act. "What makes you think that?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Eric glanced around the bar nervously, then leaned forward. "She's been asking me weird questions about you, about your business, about what I think would happen if you two split up." "What kind of questions?" "Like, how much do I think the firm is worth? Do I know if you have any debts she doesn't know about? Whether I think you'd fight her in a divorce or just want to get it over with quickly?" I signaled the waitress for a beer, buying myself time to think. This was either Eric trying to cover his tracks by pretending to be on my side, or it was something more complex. Maybe Vivian was planning to throw him under the bus and he was getting nervous. When did these conversations happen? Over the past few weeks, usually when you're not around. At first I thought she was just curious, Like maybe you two had been fighting and she was thinking hypothetically, but then she started asking really specific stuff. Such as? Eric fidgeted with his beer bottle. Like, what would happen to your shared assets if you died versus if you got divorced? Whether your life insurance would pay out if you had an accident? Whether I thought you were the type to contest a divorce or just accept it? The waitress brought my beer. I took a long drink, processing what Eric was telling me. If he was lying, he was doing a remarkably good job of looking terrified. "Eric, are you sleeping with my wife?" The question hung in the air between us like a live grenade. Eric's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: shock, guilt, fear, and finally something that looked like relief. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "Since Friday night. I heard you talking in the bedroom." Eric buried his face in his hands. "Jesus, Nick, I'm so sorry. It happened, and then it kept happening, and I couldn't figure out how to stop it without ruining everything." "How long? 8 months? Maybe 9? It started when I first moved in with you guys. She was lonely because you were working so much, and I was depressed about the restaurant failing, and we were both drinking too much wine one night." "Spare me the romantic details." "It's not romantic," Eric said quickly. "That's what I'm trying to tell you. For me, it was just, I don't know, comfort, I guess. Someone who made me feel like less of a failure. But for Vivian, it's something else entirely." "What do you mean?" Eric looked around the bar again, then lowered his voice to barely above a whisper. "She's obsessed with you, Nick, but not in a good way. She talks about you constantly when we're together, about how successful you are, how much money you make, how everyone in town respects you. But there's this anger underneath it all." "Anger about what?" "About feeling like she's in your shadow, about being Nick Harrow's wife instead of just Vivian. She says you make her feel small and insignificant, like she's just an accessory to your success." This was news to me. I'd always thought Vivian was proud of what I'd accomplished, proud to be part of it. "So she decided to sleep with you to get back at me?" "At first, maybe, but now," Eric shook his head. "Now I think she's planning something bigger, something that would give her everything you've built without having to share credit with you." "Like what?" "I don't know for sure, but she's been asking me to do things. Small things at first, like picking up your mail when you're not home or answering your phone when you're in the shower. But lately she's been pushing for more." "More what?" Eric reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "She asked me to copy your signature on this." I unfolded the paper and felt my blood pressure spike. It was a document transferring my shares in Harrow and Associates to Vivian in the event of my death or incapacitation. Did you sign it? I practiced a few times, but I never actually did it. That's when I realized how serious this was getting. She's not just planning to leave you, Nick. She's planning to destroy you. I stared at the document, my mind racing. If Vivian could forge my signature on legal documents, she could potentially take control of my business, my assets, everything I'd worked for. There's more, Eric said. She's been meeting with someone, a lawyer, I think. She told me she was going to her book club, but I followed her one day. She went to an office building downtown. Which building? The Morrison Building, 3rd floor. I knew the Morrison Building. It housed several law offices, including one that specialized in divorce and family law. Eric, why are you telling me this? You could have just kept quiet, let whatever happens happen, and probably ended up with half my assets when it was all over. Eric was quiet for a long moment, staring into his beer. When he looked up, his eyes were red. Because you're my brother, and despite what I've done, you don't deserve this. And because... He paused, swallowing hard. Because I think she's planning to frame me for whatever she's going to do to you. What do you mean? Some of the questions she's been asking, they're not just about you. They're about me, too. About my financial situation, my criminal record. You have a criminal record? Just some stupid stuff from college. Petty theft, disorderly conduct. Nothing serious, but it's there. And she's been asking about it. About whether those kinds of things stay on your record forever. The picture was becoming clearer. Vivian wasn't just planning to leave me or divorce me. She was planning something that would remove me from the equation entirely, and she wanted Eric to take the fall for it. What do you want to do? I asked. Eric looked surprised. You're asking me? You came to me, remember? You must have some kind of plan. I was hoping you'd have a plan. You're the smart one, remember? I'm just the screw-up who can't keep his hands off his brother's wife. I finished my beer and stood up. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to go home and act like nothing happened. Keep sleeping with Vivian. Keep letting her think you're under her control. But I want you to document everything. Every conversation, every request, every meeting she goes to. You want me to spy on her? I want you to help me figure out exactly what she's planning before she does it. Can you do that? Eric nodded slowly. What about us? I mean, after this is all over, what happens between us? I looked at my brother. Really looked at him. He was weak, selfish, and had betrayed me in the worst possible way. But he was also scared, and he was trying to make it right. I don't know, I said honestly. But right now, you're the only advantage I have. Vivian thinks she's playing chess while I'm playing checkers. Let's show her how wrong she is. As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Friday night. Hope. Not hope that my marriage could be saved. That was over, and I knew it. But hope that I could turn the tables on the people who were trying to destroy me. Vivian was already asleep when I got home. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom watching her peaceful face in the moonlight and wondered how long she'd been planning my downfall. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October clarity that makes you believe anything is possible. I was at my office by 7, 2 hours before anyone else would arrive, using the quiet time to put my plan into motion. First, I called my lawyer, David Chen, and scheduled an emergency meeting for that afternoon. Then, I called my accountant and asked for a complete audit of all business and personal accounts. Finally, I called Terry Doyle and asked him to expand his surveillance to include Sienna Marlowe. You think the friend is involved? Terry asked. I think Vivian's too smart to plan something this elaborate without backup. Sienna's the only person she trusts completely. By the time Marty arrived at 8:30, I had a comprehensive strategy mapped out. It was risky, required perfect timing, and depended on several people doing exactly what I expected them to do. In other words, it was either brilliant or insane. You look different, Marty observed, settling into his usual chair with his usual coffee. Different how? I don't know, more focused, like you've made a decision about something. I have. I'm going to destroy them before they destroy me. I filled Marty in on the previous night's conversation with Eric, showing him the forged signature document and explaining Vivian's apparent plan. Son of a witch, Marty muttered when I finished. She's really going all in on this, isn't she? Looks like it. Which means I need to go all in too. The morning passed quickly. I had client meetings, phone calls with contractors, the usual business of running an architectural firm. But underneath the normal routine, I was hyper-aware of every detail, every conversation, every decision. If Vivian was planning to take over my business, I needed to make sure there was nothing for her to take. At lunch, I met with David Chen at his office downtown. David was one of those lawyers who looked like he'd stepped out of a legal thriller. Expensive suit, silver hair, the kind of confidence that comes from winning more cases than you lose. "This is quite a situation you've found yourself in," he said after I'd explained everything. "The good news is that Maine is not a community property state, so your business assets are somewhat protected. The bad news is that if your wife can prove you've been hiding assets or planning to defraud her of her rightful share, things could get complicated. What if she's the one planning fraud? Then we need proof, solid, admissible proof, not just testimony from your brother, who frankly doesn't make the most credible witness given his involvement with your wife." David walked me through the legal realities of divorce in Maine, the protections available to business owners, and the steps I needed to take to safeguard my assets. It was a sobering conversation, but it also gave me the framework I needed for what came next. That evening, I arrived home to find Vivian in the kitchen, preparing what looked like an elaborate dinner. Candles, wine, my favorite pasta dish, the full romantic treatment. "What's the occasion?" I asked, kissing her cheek and trying to ignore the wave of revulsion that swept over me. "Do I need an occasion to make dinner for my husband?" she replied, but there was something forced about her smile. Eric appeared from the living room, also dressed nicer than usual. "Hey, Nick. Vivian thought it would be nice for the three of us to have a proper family dinner." Family dinner, right. We sat around the dining room table like we had dozens of times before, but tonight felt different. There was an undercurrent of tension, as if all three of us were waiting for something to happen. "So," Vivian said, refilling our wine glasses, "how was your day? Any interesting projects?" "The usual. Permits, planning meetings, client hand-holding." I took a sip of wine and studied her face. "How about you? What did you do today?" "Oh, just errands. Boring stuff." She exchanged a quick glance with Eric. "Actually, I had lunch with Sienna. She mentioned something interesting." "Oh?" "She said she saw you at Murphy's Diner yesterday, with some man she didn't recognize." Here we go, I thought. "I told you about that. Terry Doyle, the contractor." "Right, the contractor." Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. "The thing is, Sienna knows most of the contractors in town, and she's never heard of a Terry Doyle." I felt the familiar adrenaline spike of a confrontation, but I kept my expression neutral. "He's not from around here. He specializes in historic renovations, works all over New England." Vivian took another sip of wine. "Well, I'm sure you'll introduce us sometime." "Of course." The conversation moved on to safer topics, local politics, the weather, Eric's job search. But I could feel Vivian watching me, looking for cracks in my story. She suspected something, but she wasn't sure what. After dinner, Eric excused himself to take a phone call. The moment he left the room, Vivian moved closer to me on the couch. "Nick, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Are you happy? I mean, really happy? With us? With our marriage?" The question caught me off guard. Of all the things I'd expected her to say, this wasn't one of them. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we've been married for 8 years, and sometimes I feel like we're just going through the motions, like we're roommates who happen to share a bed." I stared at her, wondering if this was genuine self-reflection or just another manipulation tactic. "I think we're fine," I said carefully. "Are we, though? When was the last time we talked about the future, about what we want from life, about whether we still want the same things we wanted when we got married?" "Vivian, where is this coming from?" She was quiet for a moment, staring into her wine glass. "I've been thinking about what would happen if one of us died. Would the other one be okay? Would they be able to move on and find happiness again?" There it was, the opening gambit of whatever game she was playing. That's a morbid topic for a Monday night. Maybe, but it's important, don't you think? To know that the person you love would be taken care of if something happened to you? I have life insurance. You'd be fine financially. I'm not talking about money, Nick. I'm talking about emotional support, about having people in your life who care about you. She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, and for a moment I almost forgot that this was the same woman who'd been planning my destruction. "You'd have Eric," I said. "He'd take care of you." I felt her tense slightly. "Eric's sweet, but he's not you. He's not strong enough to handle real responsibility. Interesting. So even while she was sleeping with him, she still saw Eric as weak and unreliable. That was useful information. Well, hopefully we won't have to worry about it for a long time. Hopefully not. Eric returned from his phone call and we spent the rest of the evening watching television. But I could feel the wheels turning in Vivian's head, and I knew that whatever she was planning was accelerating. That night, as I lay in bed listening to Vivian's breathing, I thought about the conversation we'd had. She was testing me, trying to gauge my suspicions and my emotional state. The question was whether she'd bought my performance, or whether she was now convinced I knew more than I was letting on. Either way, it was time to stop playing defense and start playing offense. Tomorrow, I would begin dismantling the life she thought she was going to steal. Tuesday morning, I woke up with the clarity that comes from knowing exactly what you have to do. Vivian was already downstairs, making coffee and humming that same tune she'd been humming since Sunday. Eric was nowhere to be seen, which meant he was either still asleep or had already left for whatever he did with his days. "Morning, beautiful," I said, kissing Vivian's neck from behind. She leaned into me, and for a moment we looked like any other married couple starting their day. If you didn't know about the lies, the betrayal, the elaborate plan to destroy one spouse for the benefit of the other. "You're in a good mood," she observed. Why shouldn't I be? I have a beautiful wife, a successful business, and a brother who's finally getting his life together. Vivian's smile faltered slightly at the mention of Eric. Speaking of Eric, he mentioned he might have found an apartment, somewhere downtown. "That's great news. It'll be nice to have the house to ourselves again." "Yes," she said, but she didn't sound entirely convinced. "It will be." I left for work with a kiss and a promise to be home early for dinner. But instead of going to my office, I drove to the Morrison building downtown and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The directory listed 4 law offices. I started with the largest one, walked up to the receptionist, and put on my most charming smile. "Hi, I'm looking for my wife. She said she had an appointment here yesterday, but I can't remember which office. Vivian Harrow, auburn hair, about 5'6". The receptionist looked confused. "I'm sorry, I don't recognize that name. Are you sure it was this office?" I tried the same approach at the other 3 offices. The 3rd one, Blackwood & Associates, specializing in family law, hit pay dirt. "Oh yes, Mrs. Harrow," the receptionist said. "She's been in several times over the past few weeks, but I thought her husband's name was Eric?" "That's my brother," I said smoothly. "I'm Nick. Vivian probably mentioned me." "I don't think so. In fact, I got the impression that Eric was her husband and you were, well, someone she was having problems with." "Interesting. So Vivian was not only planning to divorce me, she was already presenting herself as Eric's wife to her lawyer. That suggested a level of planning and deception that went far beyond a simple affair. Is she scheduled to come in again soon?" "I really can't give out that information, but if you'd like to speak with Mr. Blackwood, I could see if he has a few minutes." "That's okay. I'll catch up with Vivian at home." I left the building with my mind racing. Vivian wasn't just planning to leave me. She was planning to erase me entirely. In her version of events, Eric was her husband, and I was some kind of threat or obstacle to be dealt with. Back at my office, I found Terry Doyle waiting for me with a thick folder and a grim expression. "We need to talk," he said. We went into my private office and closed the door. Terry opened the folder and spread out a series of photographs and documents. "Your wife and her friend have been busy," he said. "Yesterday, after you left for your lawyer meeting, they drove to a storage unit across town, spent about an hour there, came out carrying a box. He showed me surveillance photos of Vivian and Sienna at a storage facility I didn't recognize. I ran the registration on the unit. It's in your brother's name, paid for with cash. What's in it? I don't know yet, but I'm working on it. What I do know is that your wife made 3 phone calls after leaving the storage unit. 1 to a lawyer, probably the same one you found this morning, 1 to an insurance company, and 1 to a number I couldn't trace, but the call lasted less than 30 seconds. Terry handed me a transcript of the insurance call. Vivian had been asking about the claims process for accidental death benefits, specifically how long it typically took to process a claim and what kind of documentation was required. "She's planning to end me," I said, the words sounding surreal even as I spoke them. That's my read. The question is how and when. "And Eric? Based on what you told me about your conversation with him, I think he's the fall guy. She gets him to do the dirty work, then turns him in. As the grieving widow who discovered her husband's butcher? I stared at the photographs, trying to process the magnitude of what Vivian was planning. This wasn't just adultery or even fraud, this was premeditated homicide. What do? We get proof, solid, admissible evidence that shows premeditation and conspiracy. Then we take it to the police. How long do we have? Terry consulted his notes. Hard to say, but based on the timeline of her activities, I'd guess not long. Maybe a week, maybe less. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I went through the motions of running my business while my mind was entirely focused on survival. Every phone call could be Vivian checking on my location. Every meeting could be interrupted by news that something had happened to me. That evening, I drove home with a small digital recorder in my pocket and a plan that was either brilliant or reckless. I found Vivian and Eric in the kitchen, cooking dinner together. They looked comfortable, domestic, like a real couple, which I realized they probably thought they were. "Smells great," I said, opening a beer. "What's the occasion?" "Eric's last night here," Vivian said. "He found an apartment downtown. He'll be moving out tomorrow." "That's great news. Where's the apartment?" Eric looked uncomfortable. "It's just a studio. Nothing fancy. Above the hardware store on Main Street." I knew the building. It was a dump, the kind of place where people went when they had no other options. But it was also walking distance from the courthouse, the police station, and several bars where Eric could establish an alibi. "Well, we should celebrate," I said, raising my beer. "To new beginnings." We clinked glasses, and I watched their faces carefully. Vivian looked excited but nervous. Eric looked like he was going to be sick. After dinner, I suggested we sit on the porch and enjoy the evening air. It was a beautiful night, clear and cool, with a full moon rising over the trees. The kind of night that made you grateful to be alive. "You know," I said, settling into my chair with a fresh beer, "I've been thinking about what you said last night, Vivian, about what would happen if one of us died." Vivian tensed slightly. "Oh, I realized you're right. We should talk about these things. Make sure we're both prepared." "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app, making sure it was hidden from view. "I mean, what would you do if something happened to me? How would you handle the business, the house, all the financial stuff?" I don't know. I guess I'd figure it out." "You wouldn't be alone, though. You'd have Eric to help you." Eric was staring at his beer bottle like it held the secrets of the universe. "Eric's sweet," Vivian said carefully, "but I don't think he's equipped to handle that kind of responsibility." "Really? I think you underestimate him. I mean, if something happened to me, an accident or whatever, Eric would be the logical person to help you manage everything." "What kind of accident?" The question came out sharper than she probably intended. "I don't know. Car accident, maybe, or something at a job site. Construction can be dangerous." Vivian was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. "Nick, why are we talking about this? You're not planning to die anytime soon, are you?" "Of course not. But you brought it up, remember? You said it was important to think about these things." I was speaking hypothetically. "So am I." Eric suddenly stood up. "I think I'll call it an early night. Big day tomorrow with the move and all." He disappeared into the house, leaving Vivian and me alone on the porch. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. "He seems nervous," I observed. "He's always nervous. It's his personality." "Is it? I remember him being pretty confident when we were kids. Cocky, even." "People change." "Yes, they do." I turned off the recording and slipped my phone back into my pocket. I hadn't gotten the confession I was hoping for, but I'd gotten something almost as valuable. Confirmation that Vivian was rattled and that Eric was close to breaking. "I think I'll head to bed too," I said, standing up. "Big day tomorrow." "Nick?" Vivian's voice stopped me at the door. "Yeah? I love you. You know that, right?" I looked at her sitting there in the moonlight, beautiful and deadly and completely convinced of her own cleverness. "I know," I said. But as I walked upstairs to our bedroom, I was already planning how to destroy her. Wednesday morning, I woke up to find Vivian already gone. There was a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone to help Eric move. Back this afternoon. Love, V." Perfect. I called Terry and told him to meet me at Eric's new apartment. Then I called Marty and asked him to come with me. If things went sideways, I wanted backup. We found Eric's building easily enough, a rundown 3-story brick structure that had seen better decades. The hardware store on the ground floor was closed, and the apartments above looked like they hadn't been updated since the 1970s. Terry was waiting for us in his car across the street. "They're both up there," he said. Been there since about 8 this morning. Any idea what they're doing? Moving boxes, looks like. But here's the interesting part. They're not moving stuff in, they're moving stuff out. I looked up at the second floor windows and saw shadows moving behind thin curtains. Out to where? Storage unit. Same one I photographed them at yesterday. The pieces were falling into place. Eric wasn't really moving into this apartment. It was just a prop, a way to establish a separate residence and create the appearance of distance between him and Vivian before whatever they were planning happened. How do you want to play this? Marty asked. Direct approach. We go up there and confront them. Both of them? Both of them. The building's front door was unlocked, which told me everything I needed to know about the security of Eric's new living situation. We climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor and found apartment 2B. I knocked. Just a minute, Vivian's voice called from inside. The door opened, and my wife's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, fear, and finally a forced smile. Nick, what are you doing here? Thought I'd help Eric get settled in his new place. That's sweet, but we're almost done. Really, you didn't need to. I pushed past her into the apartment. It was exactly what I'd expected. One room with a kitchenette, a bathroom that had seen better decades, and windows that looked out on a brick wall. But what caught my attention was what wasn't there. No furniture, no clothes, no personal belongings of any kind. Just a few empty boxes and the lingering smell of cleaning supplies. Nice place, I said. Very minimalist. Eric emerged from the bathroom looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. Hey, Nick, thanks for coming by, but like Vivian said, we're pretty much done here. Done with what? There's nothing here. Vivian and Eric exchanged glances. In that moment, I saw their entire relationship laid bare. Her calculating intelligence, his weak desperation, their mutual dependence on a plan that was rapidly falling apart. Eric decided he didn't like the apartment, Vivian said quickly. We're just cleaning it up before he tells the landlord he's changed his mind. Really? That's too bad. I was looking forward to having you out of the house. The words hung in the air like a slap. Eric flinched. Vivian's smile became even more forced. Well, she said, maybe he'll find something else soon. I'm sure he will. In fact, I bet he'll find exactly what he's looking for very soon. I walked to the window and looked out at the brick wall. Great view. You could really disappear here, couldn't you, Eric? Just blend into the background, become invisible. Nick, what are you getting at? Vivian's voice had an edge to it now. I'm getting at the fact that you're both lying to me. This isn't Eric's apartment. He was never planning to live here. This is just part of whatever elaborate scheme you two have been cooking up. Silence. Then Eric cracked. I can't do this anymore, he said, slumping against the wall. I can't keep lying to you, Nick. You're my brother. Eric, shut up, Vivian hissed. No, I won't shut up. This has gone too far. Eric looked at me with eyes full of guilt and fear. She wanted me to end you, Nick. Make it look like an accident, then disappear. She said we could be together, that she'd wait a reasonable amount of time, and then we'd get married. Vivian's face went white. You idiot. You complete idiot. But I couldn't do it, Eric continued. I kept trying to work up the nerve, but every time I looked at you, all I could think about was when we were kids, how you always looked out for me, how you bailed me out when the restaurant failed. Eric, I said quietly, are you wearing a wire? What? No, of course not. Good, because what you just told me is a confession to conspiracy to commit homicide. Vivian had been backing toward the door, but now she stopped. You can't prove anything. It's just the word of a man who's been having an affair with his brother's wife. No jury would believe him. Maybe not, I said, but they might believe this. I pulled out my phone and played back the recording from the previous night's porch conversation. Vivian's voice filled the small apartment. What kind of accident? The question that revealed she'd been thinking about specific scenarios. That's not enough, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. How about this? Terry appeared in the doorway holding a small device. Digital recorder, he explained. Been running since you walked in here. Got the whole conversation. Vivian looked around the room like a trapped animal. Eric was crying now, great heaving sobs that shook his whole body. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Eric, you're going to check yourself into rehab. Drinking, gambling, whatever issue seems most believable. You're going to stay there for at least 6 months, and when you get out, You're going to move somewhere far away from here. What about Vivian? Vivian is going to divorce me. Quietly, amicably, with a settlement that leaves her comfortable but not wealthy. She's going to move away too, start over somewhere else. And if we don't agree, Vivian asked, then Terry takes these recordings to the police, and you both get arrested for conspiracy to commit homicide. Vivian stared at me for a long moment, her mind working through the angles, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. You son of a witch, she said finally. You planned this whole thing. I learned from the best. How long have you known? Since Friday night. Since your little truth or dare game? She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. That wasn't a confession, Nick. That was me trying to spice up our marriage. I thought maybe if I could get you interested in something adventurous. You thought you could manipulate me into accepting your affair, make me complicit in my own betrayal. Something like that. I looked at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no regret. Just a cold satisfaction that the game was finally over. The divorce papers will be ready by Friday, I said. Sign them, take your settlement, and disappear, both of you. Eric was nodding frantically. Yes, okay. Whatever you want. I'm sorry, Nick. I'm so sorry. But Vivian wasn't done fighting. You think you've won, don't you? You think you're so clever, turning the tables on us. I don't think I've won, Vivian. I know I have. We'll see about that. She pushed past Terry and stormed out of the apartment. Eric started to follow her, then stopped. Nick, Just don't. Get help, Eric. Real help. And stay the heck away from me. By Friday, it was over. Vivian signed the divorce papers without reading them, took her settlement check, and left town that same day. Eric checked into a rehabilitation facility in Boston and sent me a letter apologizing for everything and promising to make amends somehow. I kept the letter, but never answered it. 6 months later, I was sitting in the Glass Hammer, celebrating the completion of my biggest project ever, a mixed-use development that would revitalize downtown and make me more money than I'd ever dreamed of. Marty was there, Terry was there, even my lawyer David had shown up to toast my success. To Nick Harrow, Terry said, raising his glass, the man who played the perfect hand. I looked around the bar at the faces of the people who'd stood by me when everything fell apart, who'd helped me rebuild my life from the ground up. Not perfect, I said, but good enough. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, covering the town in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and new. I thought about Vivian and Eric, wherever they were, whatever they were doing. I hoped they'd found some measure of peace, some way to live with what they'd done. But mostly, I didn't think about them at all. I'd dealt the last hand, and I'd won everything that mattered.